Wilson SOSSION is an educationist. He's a former Secretary General of the Kenya National Union of Teachers. He's our guest today. Good morning, sir.
Yeah, good morning.
Welcome to Kenya's biggest conversation. That's the hot seat of the Situation Room.
Oh, thank you.
Karibu sana. We'll be talking about education and, of course, this transition from 844 into full CBC, and then the fallout over the weekend over the results that were announced for the Standard 8. But we welcome you to the conversation. City has the day's proverb, and this week's proverbs will be from
the Republic of Southern Sudan.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. An animal with a long tail should not step over fire.
An animal with a long tail should not step over fire. Mwalimu SOSSION, what's your interpretation of this proverb?
Yes, an animal with a long tail should not step over fire. That means it will burn everywhere. Because if the long tail takes the longest time to catch the fire. Yeah. Isn't it?
Mm-hmm. So what's the question?
Yeah.
What's the deeper meaning of this proverb?
Yeah. Don't get into where there's trouble if you are fond of trouble. So I would understand.
Don't get into areas with trouble if you are fond of trouble.
Yes. You have a high affinity of getting into trouble.
Yeah.
So avoid where there's trouble.
Okay.
The long tail can be the trouble.
What are you up to nowadays? I know you had been appointed to CAS and then things happened.
Well, to be appointed to Chief Administrative Secretary position, which of course it's being contested in court, I'm still within the framework and the core of Kenya Kwanza administration. But of course not necessarily in government. So we've a lot of things to engage in. We've got a lot of work to do to implement the plan, to assist the president to ensure that the plan is implemented as was committed to the people of Kenya. Yes, so there's a lot of work to do.
Okay.
Yeah, even when I'm here, I'm on duty.
You're still on duty?
Yes.
Are we paying you for that?
Absolutely. You're not paying me.
Okay.
But it is what you call noble duty to the nation. You don't need to be paid. Yeah.
Service to the nation.
Service to the nation.
Sawa.
Yeah, patriotically. Yeah. Yes.
We are transitioning to CBC. We have seen the last cohort of Standard 8s sitting there, KCPE. The results are out. We'll talk about that in greater detail shortly. We are now seeing them joining Form 1 next year. And in 4 years' time, they'll exit, and that will be the final KCSE as well as we move and move. You've been one of the big supporters of 844. And also you, as the Secretary General of KNUT, were at the point of implementation of CBC. So first, are we properly implementing CBC?
Of course, that's a debatable thing. You remember, I think you put things right. I was a critic of how things were being done wrong in the rollout of CBC. That's a plain language you should use. And I did so through concrete research studies that I conducted. One was teacher preparedness, a very detailed research study that we conducted across the country. And facts, data, research data doesn't lie, doesn't change. World Bank and others conducted a similar survey and they found the same facts, that really we were not prepared in terms of teachers, and we had not prepared our teachers, we had not trained teachers for the different learning areas. Of course, you talk of like in grade 7, engineering aspects of education. Do we really have teachers available in all the schools? We don't. And that we foresaw. Because if you want to roll out a new curriculum, you don't begin at school level. You begin at the teacher training colleges and universities by conducting studies, encouraging universities to study, to conduct research studies across countries that have mounted similar studies, similar education systems. That is one. Two, then you begin designing framework for teacher training and then train teachers for that new curriculum, so that as you roll out you roll out with teachers who are trained to deliver that curriculum. That is where we disagreed with the previous administration that was very eager to bypass all the professional steps of rolling out curriculum, because there are steps of rolling out a curriculum. You don't wake up and pronounce that we are moving to CBC, CBC, and then CBC automatically happens. It doesn't. You must prepare teachers. That was my central concern. Number two, do we really have the adequate quality resources, teaching and learning tools, and infrastructure to roll out CBC? That's the question I asked at that time, and we were not ready. And remember, Amina Mohammed came and suspended, as the CS, suspended the rollout of CBC based on a detailed summative evaluation survey that was carried out by Professor Laban Airo and team. And that invited wrath, and she was removed from the ministry. That tells you some of these reforms are driven by cartels. They are driven externally by external interest. And I will tell you, Latiff, if you look at the history of education in Africa, what was handed over to us by the colonialists was education just to prepare us to be workers in government offices. The white-collar jobs. That's what every African country needed at that time. And for Kenya, the Ominde report of 1964 only developed an education system that would churn out graduates for white-collar jobs in government. That's how it was. But when Moi came up with Professor Mackay in 1981 and developed a program for the second University of Science and Technology in Kenya. That was the main work of Professor Mackay and team. It became necessary to develop an education system that would prepare students for that pathway and for industrialization. So Moi's idea was to change our education system to trigger our model of education towards industrialization. It was a masterpiece, and a lot of studies were done all over the world by the team that was preparing. A lot of research work went into it. The second University of Science and Technology was Moi University, the current Moi University, which has also ceased being a University of Science and Technology because it's offering everything. That's why we lost it somewhere along the way. So when Moi developed that model, I think that was going to be a panacea of industrial revolution in Africa. And you know, if Africa can industrialize, then the West will not be able to access the minerals that we have. We'll be able to control our minerals. We'll be able to do value addition, to do our own manufacturing, which is not in their interest. So there are a lot of concerted external interest from the West to support H844. That is what was done. And that is why the Kamunge report of 1988 of education and manpower development for the next decade and beyond for Kenya was sponsored by World Bank. And the main byproduct of that working party and that report was cost sharing of education. And we were still relying on donor funding to run our education. Do you think a donor will fund you to wipe them out of the market? Because if Africa industrializes, then the global north and the west will be out of the market, the way Asia have done. Asia broke away. They developed their own education models. They focused on STEM. You don't need to do a lot of mind-boggling of what to do. STEM education is the real thing. Science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. That's what Singapore did. That is what Malaysia did. That is what South Korea did. That is what was obtaining in Japan. The entire Asia, they focused on STEM education, and that is why they have industrialized. But Africa, we have remained cozy and dependent and slaves of the West in terms of donor funding. So when 844 was supported, then very good subjects like electricity, industrial education, metalwork, woodwork, and the workshops in primaries collapsed the enrollment in schools dropped. We have dropped to our gross enrollment of about 90%, and we had over 3 million children dropping out of school, and therefore 844 was bastardized.
Yeah.
We did not achieve the 844 was supposed to prepare self-reliant citizens who are innovative, creative, and who can work in the blue-collar market and with skills, complete with skills, and who could help Kenya to industrialize. And you remember, there was a Nyayo Pioneer, the big idea by Moi government, and it was fought vigorously by the West, because you can imagine if Kenya can manufacture their own cars, then the Volkswagens will miss their markets here, the Toyotas will miss their markets, the Land Rover companies and all of them. If we can have our own country manufacturing and leading in automobiles. I was in Malaysia in 2007, and you cannot see Toyota, you can't see Mercedes, it is Citroen, what is manufactured in Malaysia. Proton rather, yes, manufactured in Malaysia. And that is what was going to happen in Kenya. Then that same model was supported. You remember Cameroon, the research from the HIV/AIDS treatment from Kemri. All that was supported. But you see, in 1999, David Koech report recommended intensive investment in public education to correct and strengthen 844. Because we had it. Even this CBC is simply the component of skills of 844. It, in fact, I would say it would even be, the package is much weaker than 844. So 844 was the best. And David Koech's recommendation was shot down by cartels from private schools.
Well,
and therefore, that report was never adopted by government.
Okay.
And
Looking at
and we continued limping up to where we are now with the CBC.
Let me just come in and ask you something here, because what we're saying essentially is that, I mean, what you're saying, and I think it's important, because if we look at some of the issues, they're fundamental issues that we are dealing with now. If it's possible for us to do away with what has happened even in 2023, because they're connected. The historical aspect that you're giving us here is connected with what is happening presently. And we're looking at a situation whereby facilities, inadequacy of those facilities, inadequacy of teachers who are properly trained to handle this, who are not properly trained to handle this new curriculum. Those are issues that we are staring down the barrel of coming into 2024. We already stared down them in 2023. But are you saying that a system which many have touted to have worked, you are very clear here, that 844, there was nothing wrong with it.
Absolutely.
We needed to tighten the screws here and there to make sure that we were delivering learners who then would, be worth their salt, whether they worked for government or whether they started their own businesses, whatever. But did Kenya sell its birthright of education to the West on a system that would have worked very well? But then the question is, for what? Why would it be so easy to give it up if there were so many people who believed in the substance of 844?
I will take you back, because education is linked to the economy, it's linked to the global business, it's linked to global interest, it's linked to geopolitics. If you remember, in 1998, the structural adjustment programs and the stringent measures from the World Bank and the recommendation from the World Bank for government to stop recruitment of civil servants and teachers, and also to tighten the expenditure, and the teaching service was definitely affected. Kenya became a slave of dictation from the West, because you can't do anything without their funding. That we became automatic slaves. And during the Moi era, remember when Moi retired, even our roads were dilapidated, our economy was down because of that supportage from the West. There was nothing we could do about it. But that does not mean we lost with 844. We lost with the aspect of skills. We could not gain traction in expanding the technical aspects of 844 from primary all through. And so these subjects were only restricted to national schools, because for you to do power mechanics, you have to join a national school. For you to do electricity at, say, Form 1, you have to join a national school. For you to do music, it's only found in a national school. And I dare say the creative economy of Kenya is doing very well because of the strength of music in the school systems. And we can see it's obtaining in universities. So these skill-based subjects were restricted to only a few premium national schools. But what was retained, that is so strong about 844, if you look at the sciences, that the teaching of science, that is STEM, was fairly good, because we eliminated the physical science, the general science, and students have been taught on pure science under 844 right from Form 1.
But what about this
therefore,
colonial education that we sometimes say was the bane of our existence and what brought what you're referring to as slavery? That same education gave us technical schools. There were technical schools in this country.
Now, I'll take you back to the history of the technical schools. During the Ominde Commission, a few technical schools were identified. Of course, we had a few in Kenya, Kaiboi Technical School, Sigalagala Technical, a few, strictly exclusively for technical. But 844 expanded the teaching of technical subjects in all schools.
It did.
It did, in all schools. It gave that
but
provision.
The technical
and that is why the
died.
technical schools were automatically phased out, because there was no sense for them to exist. You've already had workshops in primary schools, if you were to have workshops in secondary schools.
But did we have those workshops in primary and secondary schools?
We did not invest.
Yes,
the
exactly.
Problem is
we killed the technical schools and there was nothing to replace them.
So we lost the technical schools, and we did not invest in the technical subjects in our school system. So we lost it. And the technical subjects were transferred to be offered in select national schools. That's where we lost it. But I want to say the 844, despite all that, we gained a lot in the teaching of sciences in our school system. And that is one. Two, in terms of knowledge-based education, because we are talking about education, knowledge and skills. Those two go together. Those two. That is why we define basic education as basic. Why basic? Because at that level, you are strengthening the bodies of knowledge in a learner, in terms of teaching, cognitive-wise. So that is a stage of concretizing knowledge. I think with the teaching of the 844, we have one of the strongest knowledge-based education system. And that is why our graduates after Form 4, they're doing very well in the Ivy League universities. In fact, a grade C here in Kenya would be grade A in Botswana, comparatively, when you do comparative education and analysis. And we've seen our graduates from Form 4, out of the 844, they've been scoring first class in the Ivy League universities. Some of them are writing papers for master students and the rest. So in terms of outcome-based and knowledge outcomes, 844 has scored it very well. All we needed to do was to integrate the skills. But now, fast forward to the idea of CBC. CBC, or skill-based education, the 21st century skills, the competencies, and value-based education could have been introduced and been integrated with the existing education system, that is CBC. You cannot say you are uprooting a whole education system and you are bringing in a new one. In education reforms and reviews, any new aspects must ride on the existing curriculum. That was the contention we had. And you must prepare teachers. It still remains an issue to date, even as we walk to 2024. That's a fact that we must tell.
844 did exactly that. 844 didn't prepare teachers.
844, the teachers who teach the technical subjects were never prepared and they were never trained. That is why those technical subjects collapsed. And it narrowed down to a few national schools where you could find those few teachers. But now with the CBC, you want to teach home science in all schools. You want to teach music in all schools. You want to offer foreign languages in all schools? Have you trained teachers in those particular areas? Those are the questions, fundamental questions that we raised. But fast forward to where we are. The Kenya Kwanza administration, while preparing for election, took a lot of time, and experts sat and reviewed the process of our education system. And we agreed we are not going to continue this way. We have to take education back to public conversation, and we get it right for the good of Kenyans and for the good of the country. Furthermore, the main pillar of Kenya Kwanza is that of enhancing industrialization, manufacturing, and triggering production at all levels. That means we also have to realign our education system towards that, because once it is off, the offtake of industrialization, manufacturing, and value addition, once that is done, then it will rely heavily on our education system.
It's still not happening.
Well, you know, a whole year has been lost.
It's not happening.
One whole year has been lost by the new entrance into the CBC system.
Why can't you wait? Be patient. It's good to be patient, because a lot of work has been done and a lot of work is being implemented. The Presidential Working Party on Education and Reforms report is already up, and a session of paper will be getting to Parliament with the accompanying pieces of legislation to realign very many issues beyond CBC, so that we have a more organized and robust education system that is equitable and that is free for all Kenyans. So if you look at the model that has been developed, it is going to be a mixed model, because one, the exit exams, because you will be able to gauge the combination of competencies, skills, and values together with knowledge by looking at the evaluation system. For example, at grade 9, this time round, it is going to be there will be a summative exam made up of 60%. What will be a summative exams testing? It will be testing the bodies of knowledge. So what has been innate for the strong aspect of knowledge will continue to be retained, because you can't throw it out. Skills, competencies, and values will always ride on knowledge. And that is what we've agreed, and that is what is contained in the report. At the exit of Form 4, students will be able to sit for a summative exam made up of 70%. The other 30% will be through formative evaluation at every stage of learning. So there's it's no longer a pure CBC as such, but it's a mixed model that has a lot of knowledge in it and combination of competencies, skills.
So Wilson, you're saying that there's still some more tweaking and tinkering that's happening in the implementation of CBC. This is how many years into CBC? Is it 4?
Yeah.
4 years into CBC.
4 years.
It is 1 year into Kenya Kwanza administration in review and restructuring CBC, so that it's relevant and it's accessible and equitable to all Kenyans and of good quality. Those are things we looked at, and a lot of reforms are being undertaken. That is, number one, reorganizing the entire structure. Now we have what we call comprehensive school, from pre-primary 1 to grade 9, all consolidated as one. And that will mean education will be availed to children closer to the households, at least up to grade 9. That one overcomes the barriers of cost, and therefore households will be able to access education for the many years for most of the early years of the learners up to grade 9. That's important to beat the aspect of access and ensure there is equity. That is number one. Okay. Number two, the quality of comprehensive schools will be elevated, both in terms of infrastructure and deployment of teachers. And if you look at what government has done, employment of 56,000 teachers within the first 1 year, and to bridge the entire gap of 116 will be done within the next 2 years. And that, so the question of transferring indirect cost of employment of teachers to parents will be eliminated. The fundamental objective here is to ensure that all our public schools are competitive and of good quality, good enough as compared to private schools, so that education is qualitatively available to the household. That's the main philosophy. Then we will retain the senior secondary, and the senior secondary will remain for pathways, and the pathways are 3, and the key pathway that will take majority of the students is STEM education: science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. That will take over 60% of the students within the school system, and therefore the current existing secondary schools will be elevated to offer the pathways, and the first cohort will report in 2026. And so all the focus for the current existing secondary schools across the country is to prepare for the 3 pathways. And of course, many schools will be able to offer the 3 of them. The other 2 pathways is humanities and social sciences, because we still need lawyers, we need businessmen, we need journalists. It's another core aspect of our industry and our normal life. And then the other category, that is the other pathway, is performing arts and sports. And if you look at the manifesto of Kenya Kwanza, creative economy and promoting the creative economy is one key flagship and pillar of Kenya Kwanza. So all this speaks to the future and the market, the competitive economic market that we must prepare all our citizens for.
Are you still of your opinion?
Focusing on STEM education and strengthening STEM education right from comprehensive school and
all the way to senior secondary will be a big...
Yes.
SOSSION, hold on. Are you still of the opinion that CBC is being implemented backwards? You said that at the beginning of the implementation of CBC. You have not focused on teachers, you have not focused on infrastructure, you have not focused on all those things.
I'm answering those questions because
now we have gone into junior secondary.
Latiff, I was not sitting and giving my views as a passive person within Kenya Kwanza, and I'm still not doing it now. When things are wrong, I'll say it as it is, because we are doing it for the country. The question on structure and infrastructure, the structure of education and infrastructure, I think I've answered. Now, with the consolidation of comprehensive schools, a lot of resources will go in to upgrade the infrastructure. And of course, teacher deployment aspect, that has been undertaken. And you see, if 56,000 teachers...
Where has it been undertaken, Bwana SOSSION?
Deployment of teachers?
Yes.
Now, I'll come to that. When 56,000 teachers have been employed and deployed, that is a pragmatic step.
But where
now,
have they
that is
deployed?
one across the country. Go check. There are teachers. They've been deployed. Go check with the data of TSC. The gap has been 116,000 teachers, and those that have been employed are 56,000.
The quality of the teacher has been a matter of concern.
Let's now discuss the teacher question.
Let's go into it.
It's
the quality
of
the teacher has been an issue. As the children were moving into grade 7,
teacher question.
That's what I'm asking. That's what I'm asking. As the children were moving into grade 7, they went with 0 teacher. And quickly the government, of course, employed the first cohort of 32,000, and they've been employing. You have not had the question.
Curriculum.
Listen to the question.
Yes.
Listen to the question. The teachers have then been progressively employed and deployed to the schools. Some of them got to the schools on the 3rd term of grade 7 for some of these pupils. The question is, have those grade 7s received quality education as they move into grade 8?
Latiff, let me
Are the new cohorts of grade 7s going to find teachers
Let me answer you,
quality?
Because will they receive even when they are getting to grade 8 and grade 9?
Those
are the big questions. What was the problem? What was the curriculum model that was in place? Was it deliverable? I would say it wasn't deliverable. When you have 14 learning areas, 12 compulsory, and the content high-pitched. That was a mistake, a fundamental mistake. And that is being corrected. The learning areas have been reduced from 14 to 9. The content of those areas are being pitched down and reviewed appropriately. What will happen? Once that has been reduced and toned down, then it will be possible to deploy even the existing teachers, because you don't need a new teacher to teach history. The teachers have been there. You don't need a new teacher to teach English. You don't need the only aspect where teachers are needed are the technical areas. The pre-industrial subject is only one subject, and integrated science. And even integrated science teachers already exist. So really, and by the time they transit from grade 9 to senior secondary, they will meet, already they'll find enough adequate and available teachers. In terms of remodifying and remodeling the existing teachers to be deployed to class, it is adequate. That needs to be relooked into.
So the primary school
curriculum
teachers
review
are now teaching JSS.
Primary school teachers, let me tell you, even within the domain of humanities, can teach up to grade 9. Once the learning areas are reviewed downwards and the content pitch, because the content of grade 7 is still, in CBC is still the same content in 844. The content of grade 8 is still the same content in CBC. So in terms of economics of education, you cannot bring new personnel who do not even exist from nowhere to replace the existing ones.
So the standard 7, standard 8 teachers are teaching grade 7, grade 8.
That's a fact. You go. Do you want to tell me that magically that one teacher is teaching all the 14 subjects?
Of course not, and that's the question.
And that there will be, and that is why it has been renamed comprehensive school under one head teacher who will ensure that there is a teacher teaching in every teaching lesson for all the learning areas. And the gap has been bridged. The rest will be a matter of deploying appropriate teachers to teach. The other aspect to solve the issue of teachers permanently is to look at the teacher training and capacity building. This has, from the Presidential Working Party report, there are a lot of extensive and comprehensive measures about capacity building of teachers. That one, the continuous capacity building of teachers shall now be conducted at the teacher training colleges, comprehensive. So that means a lot of work will be done at the teacher training colleges and universities. 2, the establishment of Kenya School of Teaching. And it will require a completely new legislation so that we fast track and remodel capacity building of teachers. Is another key proposal, other than continuing to recruit adequate teachers.
So
this is being done.
What is Kenya School of Teaching?
Kenya School of Teaching is like Kenya School of Law. That's where you prepare and capacity build teachers adequately. Currently,
so teachers are being from training colleges and universities and go to Kenya School of Teaching.
Kenya School of Teaching are those who are already in service.
Okay.
Yes. Those who are already in the teaching service, so that you continuously capacity build them and prepare them. We want to get out of the pitfalls of the 844 by investing more in teacher capacity building, teacher training, and teacher deployment. That's a key thing. And so if you look at, there's a whole chapter on teacher training and teacher management within the Presidential Working Party report. And to me, I'm satisfied. That is a substantial step. The next key thing is the universities and teacher training colleges.
Before we get to that, I just have a question about how this is actually going to be mechanized. And I think this is great. All of these suggestions that have been made, Presidential Working Party went around the country, did 1, 2, 3. But there's a fundamental thing that we're talking about here, which is necessary to do. And you can have plans for years. It's great. But if you cannot mechanize this process, it's a big problem. If we look at a year whereby we're looking at something as basic as capitation that has not even been released, how are we going to fund resource-wise, whether it is infrastructure, again, whether it's looking at the capacity of teachers, whether it's looking at the money that is supposed to be sent to schools to make sure that this thing runs at whatever level, we're still having a problem where close to 40% in an academic year of capitation has not been sent. All of these grand and lofty plans cannot work if we are not looking at the very meat of what needs to make this thing happen. How is that all going to be sorted out if we cannot sort out a money issue?
You know, the issue of money issue is a whole topic in itself. We need to discuss very extensively and be frank and honest to Kenyans and to ourselves. Before you even talk of 40% that has not been dispersed, what is the 60% that has been done? Has it translated into value for learners? And,
no, that's the question.
Let me tell you, I've been in this space of campaigning for government funding of education for a long time. And I can tell you, Kenya is one country that has committed substantial resources to education compared to many countries in Africa at 6% of the GDP. And of course, the global standard is 6% minimum. But you go to countries like Tanzania, they are 2%. Many countries, they're not putting sufficient money. That's the truth. But Kenya, we have done well. And at 28% of the overall budget. But the global standard is at least 15%. So we've beat the threshold. There are other resources like CDF, Constituency Development Fund. It goes 90% to schools and to education and to infrastructure. There are other fundings, even from county government. It can still be channeled to do the same.
So there's a lot of money into education.
So we have a lot of money. Now the question is
there value for that money?
Let me answer your question. I think it is time before we even talk of enhancing financing in terms of capitation to ensure that we have good accountability structures in place. We don't. We have a collapsed audit. This money is rarely audited. That's the truth. We don't have audit reports of how money is spent in schools, how it is dispensed from the ministry. First of all, you as even media, we should question the accountability for the little before we think of adding, so that we ensure that this money goes to school and it is used for the intended purposes for the learner. And I think that that's a whole chapter in itself. And for me, I have lots of reservation in terms of strengthening the accountability structures of funding of education in this country. That is one. Two.
Hold on. That's the question. The question is, and that's what Ndu is asking, money is not getting the little that we have set aside for education, the little 800 and so billion shillings, little that we've set aside for education, it's not going to the schools on time. And then it comes to, even when it arrives to school, how is it being utilized? Is it a whole criminal enterprise from the Ministry of Education to school?
I've reversed a question, and it is important I reverse. I'm not here to answer why money has not been released from Treasury and to the Ministry of Education. I'm not responsible for that. But I'm asking a fundamental question as a Kenyan. We need to have accountability structures for all this money. Of course, there is a policy that 50% of capitation should get to school first term, 30% second term, 20% third term.
You do realize some of the plans that you're speaking about, just hold on, why it's very important here, and I think we can't gloss over this. It is very important to look at that, because these things you're talking about, these grand plans for the next 3 years, if all of that is going to be placed on the same system where we are unable to be accountable for funds that have been given to this sector in the lion's share, and we're saying, well, we're going to build a new system and everybody ought to be patient and see how it's going to come, and that issue has not been sorted out.
And it's that issue must be sorted out. That issue must be sorted out.
I'd rather they sort it out before you even talk about these other grand plans.
Even as you don't stop planting. You don't stop planning simply because of lack of accountability.
But learning has stopped.
And accountability structures must be in place. That one, no choice.
Absolutely.
All of us might agree. It must be there. It must be in place, and that is That's my own view, and that is my own experience.
You are right.
Yes, and I've said
I actually agree with you, because we are not even sure, if we can't account for it, whether that money that we're actually giving is actually adequate.
Exactly.
That money is for who? Is money for Kenya.
Yes.
And that is why, for us taking a minute to talk about accountability structures and accounting is important. What has not been dispersed shall still be dispersed. What needs to be reviewed upwards will be reviewed upwards. Let us have money flowing and giving value to Kenyans. That's my that is my view.
Why don't you advise?
And there's the government.
Why don't you advise
and that
the
is
government
what government is
to
working
take a
on.
pause?
And that is what
first of all,
no,
accountability
it can't.
for this
You can't stop working simply because you want to deal with a given aspect. You still need to do
You're
everything
encouraging theft by
as you
pumping
move
more
forward.
money into this system that
Number
has
two,
clear theft into it.
Number two, Latiff. Number two, because we must flag out the issues that we need to address, isn't it? If we don't flag out key issues, then there's nothing we are doing.
And we must address them. That's the point.
If you want to roll out a curriculum and manage education system, you must have very strong quality assurance framework in place. So that a day like this, at the end of the year, we must have a national report on the status of our education. National. We must have at the county level. We must have even reports for all the schools. Those are things that needs to be put in place. And let me tell you, if you look at the mess that is in education, even angels would weep, because we don't have a working quality assurance standard system.
We all agree
on
that.
We don't have an accountability systems in terms of audit. And I think that is what now government is addressing.
How?
Because we cannot talk. Of course, if you right now, quality assurance standard officers are being recruited, and that department is being revamped. The audit section is also being addressed.
It has been taken back to the Ministry of Education, which is
the problem.
The audit.
It started in the
quality assurance.
Yeah,
it's
whether it's taken back to the ministry, the Act talks
this is the
of
crime scene.
Education standards and quality. Even if it is taken back to the Ministry of Education, it must work. It worked before, so it must work. Those are things that we must put in place. Ensure that the quality assurance and standard department is operational and is delivering. And the audit units, when those two are working, then you will have value for your money. You can't deploy money to be wasted. It is not possible. Those are things that must be corrected, and they are being corrected surgically. Those are things that are not talked about. And I think Machogu and his team are doing a lot to try and fix some, and they've done adequate diagnostic analysis of
what?
How much time must we give them before we see this?
And what have they done? I'm very curious as to what has been done to make sure that in terms of quality assurance for the money that has been budgeted, that it has actually gone to making sure that education as a process in this country is going to the point at which it should. I would really like to know what these things are that they've done.
You can deploy money to schools without two key entities: a robust working audit that can audit every school, and a robust quality assurance that can monitor on a continuous basis and give reports. You can't. And those are gaps we saw. If you look at what Matiang'i and Magoha were doing, they usurped the authorities of the auditors and quality assurance officers themselves and killed those departments. So what is being done now is rectifying the rot of the past to restructure and revamp the quality assurance and standards department.
It's not the past. It's the present. It's not the rot of the past. It's the present, because in 2023...
I say the rot of the past. I say
this
from what I know,
this
because
is present.
Because
let's even look at 2023.
Our regime started working.
And your regime, in this regime, in the year 2023, the academic year, 47% of capitation has not been released. This year, not last year, not 2022, not 2021,
we
2023.
We've not reached 31st of December to know whether it's going to be released.
School is out.
Money can still be sent. pay the suppliers.
If we have financial issues between Treasury and the minister, that's a different thing. I can't answer for that one. But I'm questioning. We are talking about issues of accountability structures and quality assurance. That is important to you. It's important to Kenyans. These other issues, those are administrative issues within the frameworks of government. And I'm talking about what is being done. Don't you think it's going to be a beautiful thing to have a working, robust quality assurance system? And so far,
we've got to conclude our conversation
with
now.
the new CS,
Top of the hour,
with the CS, there's already deployed vehicles for the sub-counties and recruitment of officers and a proper framework to ensure that they're working.
Okay.
That is one. And
next time you come, we continue on this particular one. You'll give us timelines, not just you'll give us timelines. By this time, we should start seeing things. Wilson SOSSION,
definitely the timeline.
Former Secretary General of the Kenya National Union of
Presidential
Teachers,
Working Party
former
report.
Member of Parliament, advisor to this administration on education. Thank you very much for joining us.
I'm not an advisor of the administration. I'm a member of Kenya Kwanza.
Member of Kenya Kwanza, invested in education.
Yes.
Thank you.
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.